Thanks very much for that warm introduction from the Lieutenant Colonel. Family and friends, this sad day sees us gathered here in the Espresso Bongo complex at Macquarie Park as we farewell a berserk warrior clad only in an alfoil singlet and underpants onto the next stage of his grand experience, however you see that. That's up to you. A colleague of mine in the writing caper... A colleague of mine in the writing caper often reminds me, memory's such a poor tool for probing the past. Like many of you, I can barely remember what happened yesterday, let alone what happened 4 decades ago, and I think I've got 1 or 2 marbles left. But those dented marbles have found it exactly baffling, as I mentioned, to try and recall the time when the nips began getting bigger. But allowing for the black holes of my memory, it's often the way with long-standing friendships, isn't it? You can't remember first meetings or what you thought the future would be like. The L'Amour No More ensemble turned up in my life one day, and looking back, the weird thing is they always seem to be there. That's the trouble with time. But what survives over the decades are not the details of events, the people, the places, the cheese that you bumped into along the way, but it's the attitude you had to those remarkable events, those magical moments that is far more accurate than recollections of exact details and time and places. In those days, at the end of 1978, I was working in Melbourne for Triple R. Triple R was the home of endless conversations about the meaning and importance of music. It was a knowledgeable music crowd, as you'd expect, who knew the difference between Mark Bolan, Roy Orbison and Reckless Eric. These in-depth chinwags were often consigned to the ash can of history as soon as the record player was cranked up to 11. We were serious about music. We loved the fact that the Too Many Times Orchestra was serious about music, but more importantly, the TMT Orchestra was serious about having fun. What a revelation. Soon as we saw them, we bellowed, "How good is this?" And being polite, stuff art, let's dance. For a long time, I maintained the ideal double bill for any event, from a day drink to a school fundraiser, to a birthday knees up, to a sea cruise was mental as anything on Rockpile, the English band that featured Dave Edmunds and Nick Lowe. I'm not alone in this observation, as many suggest that that the bill is a strawberry on top of the cream, on top of the Power Pop cake. For me, these were days of great possibilities and great romance. Romance is always a great prism for seeing things in a positive, bright light. And what a soundtrack for my passion the Mentals provided. My partner would nick set lists from the foldback wedges at the front of the stage. These texture-coloured slabs of musical history are reminders of charming, endless nights. In those days, I never had a real job. Many would argue I still don't. But I was lucky enough to be employed by the band's management on a bob-a-job basis as an early adopter of the gig economy. Now, in no particular order, I painted the band's offices, then located at Rasco House in Bondi Junction. The house was home to the oddest set of tenants who were genuinely weird. They made the band look completely normal. I worked on Mentals ads for Triple M, MC'd band launches or record launches, did radio interviews, organised film clips, because by this stage I was working for Regular Records, who had a long association and successful association with the band. These were steamy days when the Creatures of Leisure loaded up the Tarago and undertook crushingly heroic East Coast tours every summer, rocking tourist hotspots from Townsville to the Tathra Hotel. There was one astonishing night in Hearts, a North Fitzroy plughole, where the band pioneered the idea of recording live sets from the stage without using any of the modern recording techniques that were available at the time. It was out there. Everything was going swimmingly, but halfway through the set, the former manager of the Song and Mull and Sex and Fun 5-piece, Jeremy Fabini, wandered into the recording truck and noticed that there were no telltale red lights blinking on any of the Revox recording machines. So the art being created inside Hearts was being passed on to, Australia's musical history without a note of it being recorded. Mercifully, we were able to begin again with some help from the management and press the right buttons, and that pioneering Cats and Dogs session is now safely tucked away in the National Film and Sound Archive. And with failing memory at this point in the spray, I realised that all of this sounds as though I just made it all up. And to be honest, you don't know if I haven't. With that in mind, let's talk about the greedy no one knew. the quiet Greedy, the silent man of song, the taciturn trooper of tunes, the dedicated follower of fashion. Let's start with Greedy's contribution to Australian science. Greed had a lifelong interest in safe nuclear power. His interest in nuclear power began when he was an incinerator monitor at primary school. Many of you have had that job, haven't you? Yes. Getting out of class to burn rubbish was the great highlight of any child's education during the heady days when we topped the world's rankings in spelling, maths and English. A highlight sadly lost on kids today, but Greed could see a future. He maintained every home should have a nuclear power pack. His dream was to have household hot boxes available at an attractive price in 3 sizes. The 2019 catalogue shows the boutique Elton was ideal for bedroom use. The Molly Meldrum covered the power needs of the kitchen and lounge. And if you needed more grunt and poke, there was always the Farnham, a rooftop square box. This cube, should I say, of molten liquid packed enough heat to satisfy all suburban needs. These units were low maintenance and so easy to use. Then there's Greedy's seldom talked about surfing career, which is now, although it has got a mention today, which is now the subject of a 5-part documentary on the ABC TV. He kept this a secret from his family, surfing at night to avoid rumours. You know how they spread. Critics claim it was the inspiration for the Get Wet concept album. His career climaxed at the Kiama Blowhole in an All-Australian final in 1976 where he took on the hole specialist and 4-time world champ Nat the Animal Young. Through the heats, the big names fell by the wayside. It was suddenly down to 2, Greed and the Animal, and they staged the greatest surfing final in the history of the Caper. The swell had been excellent all week, hitting Kiama at exactly the right angle, and a huge crowd had gathered whole side for the finals. The top seed Nat came out into the final as a warm favourite. He put on a brilliant display. He got a 9.5 for his final wave. The Animal emerged from the hole with his hair ablaze. In transit, he torched a blue flamer at the back door that sent the knowledgeable crowd wild with delight. They were on their feet screaming for more as he splashed down on Bombo Beach 7 kilometres away. Hang on. Wait till I really do something, please. Now, we haven't got to Greedy yet. Now, incidentally, Nat thought he had it in the bag, but Greed knew he could take him even though he'd broken his hip in the heats and have to surf with both legs cased in plaster. He got lucky. He picked the best wave. He lurched out of the hole with a barbecue ablaze on the front of his board. He dished up 3 stunning courses to the judges, a crab omelette as entree, a main of snapper and chips, and finished it off with a strawberry and cream pavlova that he pulled from an esky strapped to the back of the 6'9" Kool-Aid. It was too much. The judges had to give it to him. Admittedly, the judging panel was Manu, Paleo Pete, and the Talk and Fork, Big Matty Preston. But from that day, the rules of surfing were changed forever to prevent contestants influencing the judges with plates of food. And I haven't got time to mention Greedy's explosive contribution to Australian fashion, which was simply summed up when he bellowed at the Melbourne Fashion Week as he launched himself down the runway in a plum and puce ensemble. Duck and cover, sass and bide, Greed's coming on through. Incidentally, the MCA is mounting an exhibition of 450 of his stage outfits as part of Vivid in May next year. Finally, Greedy's contribution to Australian spin bowling is not widely understood or acknowledged. Look at his record. Without Greed, there'd be no Warne, no O'Keefe, Steve or Kerry, no Sleep, no Goat. The bloke bowled with beautiful flight and great areas and had the batter in 3 or 4 mines in the corridor of uncertainty outside the off stump. He was one of the few bowlers at test level that could extend the corridor of uncertainty as far as square leg, and that's no mean feat. He created his own doosra known as the Greed. It was a ball that had so much backspin on it when it lobbed, it gripped on the pitch and bounced back towards the bowler. It was completely unplayable. Incidentally, for many who'll ask, he was no stranger to giving the kookaburra a scrub with a length of sandpaper. He usually hid that cunningly in his creams, but he went further than most. Very inventive. He built a sandpaper gusset into the creams so it looked as though he was polishing the pill on his groin when actually he was roughing up the dud side. Genius. He played the innings to the very end, beyond the moment when the umpire called stumps. He would be offered the light, but he always wanted to bat on. And that is what entertainers like Greedy do. They push on. There's always another bus to catch, another bank to rob, another tune to write, another gig to play. And now we're back to the music. It's always about songs, wonderful songs that have talked to Australians for 40 years. Those hooks that you instantly recognise and feel as though you've heard them a million times before, but the trick is you haven't. The glum, melancholy tunes are as mournful as a couple of lost, smoke-blasted aliens a long way from home, changing the gearbox in their clapped-out hyperdrive on a burnt-out ridge in southwest slopes, and that's mournful. And the tunes are setting for deadbeat humorous lyrics with lumps in the throat and hearts in the footwear, backed from time to time by some of the worst keyboard sounds ever recorded. It was an act. It was a life. It was a smash hit. And he made it look like a stroll. Varley Andrew MacArthur Smith, simply known to everyone who was lucky enough to have known him or fall under his spell or love him simply as Greedy.